Alrighty. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Thank you, Molly, for getting us going again. We've got a really packed room over here with Google Meets. We've got all sorts of people. Tolga's back today. He was able to make it back today. And Tim is here. And next week's speaker, Steve, is here. And Wanda's here. And a volunteer that's going to be helping us with some stuff. And she'll be talking about that in a minute or two. So I think we best ought to get going here. Eh? Tim Hutchison is going to be talking about automating an observatory. It's something we all want to do. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to get that done right now. Get my observatory out at Goat Mountain working, and that's what Tim's talking about. Stephen next week is going to be talking about using PixInsight to process the Hubble palette. I'm going to stop sharing right now, and Tim or Steve, rather, you get ready to say something. You can see that we've got a whole bunch of good programs coming up. We do have a blank on May 30th. We need a speaker for May 30th. So we ask that you volunteer to become a speaker. And we are taking the 4th of July off so that we won't have any show on the 4th of July. But otherwise, we're good till the end of May with speakers and even some after that. So please join us with that. And I'm going to stop sharing. Steve, if you could start sharing and tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing next week.
Sure. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we're seeing it.
Let me close this down. So if I were to write a book on astrophotography, it would be called "You Don't Need to Know Everything to Take a Great Picture of Space." And so basically what I'm going to be doing is going through my workflow as it is right now to go from 3 grayscale images to, a color SHO Hubble palette image. And I've chosen the Sol Nebula as an example. So that's basically what I'm going to be doing start to finish, and taking you through every process from basically cropping all the way down to a JPEG ready to send out to your friends and impress everybody. So does that sound good with you guys?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Thank you very much. The next thing I want to do is go over to Wanda. Wanda has been helping with something, and I'm not going to be sharing my screen here. I'm turning it back over to Molly and Wanda. Wanda, what is it that you've been doing to help everybody with what we do on the Astro Imaging channel? You'll need to stop sharing, Steve.
Well, good night, everyone. Good night, everyone. Basically, what my interest in volunteering with the Astro Imaging channel is that I found that there is a trove of information in the YouTube channel. There is about more than 6 years worth of weekly programs that I personally was interested in finding more information about. And honestly, it was a little bit hard for me to find information about a specific subject or a specific speaker, even though I knew that at some program. So what we have done right now, and this is something that I think Alex was the one who initiated, was put together an Excel file that you can open from the Astro Imaging channel website, and you can see in a row, you can access from the Astro Imaging channel the program list, the program database, and there you can access the Excel file where you can see the date that the program was broadcasted, who was the speaker, what was the subject that was discussed in the program, and a brief summary of what was discussed in the program. And there is also a column with keywords that can give you an idea of the key subjects that were discussed. So if, for example, I want to learn something about imaging in very low temperatures, there is a program that was at the end of 2019 given by Tim Connolly, and you can see that when you go to the 2019 section. And you can see there is the program, where is the date, and if you click on the date, you can go directly into the YouTube broadcast for that program. So right now, 2020 is complete. You can have access to all the programs. I started working on the 2019 programs, and I'm also working on the 20 most viewed programs in the channel, so you can have access to those programs as well. And my goal is to keep adding not only the weekly broadcast, but also programs from previous years, so the list can be complete as soon as possible.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wanda. Somebody asked me a question the other day, wanted to see a program, and I said, "Oh, geez, how am I going to figure out?" Well, oh, yeah, that's right. We've got a whole set of programs that we can share with somebody, and all you need to do is go back to the program database page here on the Astro Imaging channel. Now, as you can see, it's just a spreadsheet. It's a Google spreadsheet. It's actually started off as an Excel spreadsheet. You can download this and put it in your computer and play with it and work on it. But one thing you certainly can do is you can help with the project. There are, 350 shows that we've had, and we've now got about 50 or 60 or 70 of them described like this. If you'd like to help with this program, hey, you know what you can do? You watch the program and you say, oh, well, let me see. What do I have to say? I have to say, well, write a paragraph about it and maybe think of some keywords for it, make a list. And then all you've got to do is see if I can get this right. Boink. You come back to where it says contacts here, and you could just say, you give us your name and address and email and stuff like that. And you can say, hey, I just watched the so-and-so show. Could you please add this to the database of programs that we've had on the Astro Imaging channel, and just put it as an email there and send it to us. Boom, that's all you got to do. Now, there's one other thing I want to do about, there's two other things I want to do. One is next week is going to be somewhat participative in that you can come along, you can play along with what Steve is going to be showing you. He has graciously uploaded the 3 files that he's going to be working with for next week. So Stephen Miller will be on March 28th, and the PixInsight Hubble palettes, what he's going to be talking about, he's described it for you. And you can go and you can download the various programs or the various files, and you can play with it. And if you don't want to play with it in Stephen's way, hey, there's 3 sets of data out there. There's 3 files for you. You can make yourself a pretty picture if you want to practice making a pretty picture. Let's see, coming down. Oh, got to go up to the gorgeous galaxies next on my list. See, I actually do make a list of what I'm supposed to be talking about. Boink, boink. Oh, I was already there. Never mind. For gorgeous galaxies, it says, click on this new section we've got called TAIC Shots. And gorgeous galaxies is our latest effort. We're asking you to send in your pictures of galaxies, any galaxy or galaxies, movie or still. And by movie, I mean like 10, 15 seconds of something if you for some reason have a movie, although galaxies don't move much. They're not like comets or something. It's got to be this apparition, which for a galaxy can mean any time between, I guess, July 1st of 2020 and June 30th, because that's the date that we want them all in. Send us in a JPEG or a PNG, at least 1080 pixels on one side, please. That means it's big enough without it won't pixelate when we kick it into the other stuff. And then you click below, click here to submit the file. You'll notice that's what we've done with Neowise on Parade and Orion Time. If you haven't seen those, you can come back here and get them. And there's also a section right here called Help Wanted. We've already got 1 volunteer, 2 volunteers perhaps, and maybe we would like some more. We would like some more people to help us organize this. So if you click this volunteer, it will go into your email program, and you can write a letter to tacshots.com and .gmail. Whatever it is. It's in there. That's why you just have to click the button. And you can identify yourself as somebody who'd like to help put together these slideshows. It's not hard work. it can be tedious because there can be a lot of these pictures, but we would like that kind of help. Now, one last thing I want to tell you about is, if I've got this right, click, turn myself off. Don't forget, there's a whole lot of questions over here. Everybody's starting to show up over here. We've got 71 people watching already. If you've got any questions, put them in over here. Try to put a big red question mark. Molly, how do they put a big red question mark in there?
I'll use the text just a second.
We'll put the text in there. And Tim, can you tell us just a little bit about automating observatories?
Sure.
Thank you. You're on, buddy.
All right. You want to give me control there, Alex, please?
I thought I did. Am I missing something here, guys? Oh,
You're still
that's
presenting.
funny.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
There we go. All right.
Had too many screens open. Sorry.
Let's see if I can figure this out.
Oh,
You tell me when that pops up for me.
okay.
You got
My
it.
astrophotography automation project.
All right, there we go. So unlike most of the people that you folks see here on the Astro Imaging channel, you have never heard of me before. My name is Tim Hutchison. I am a retired CEO of a software development company, and I started in astrophotography when I retired in 2018. If you annoy your wife enough, she'll buy you a telescope. That's my advice to you. I'm currently running 2 astrophotography rigs. I have an observatory that I built in my backyard, and I just recently set up a remote telescope out at Deep Sky West in Rome, New Mexico. I live here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we get about 100 cloud-free nights a year. And when you take that along with the intersection of how many nights the moon is up, there weren't a whole lot of opportunities to set up in the driveway and go out there and spend all night shooting. And that really prompted me to look for an answer. And for me, automation was the answer. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is primarily what we're doing in my backyard, although I am using the same setup out in New Mexico as well. My goals for this project were to maximize the available shooting opportunities. You know, if I got a night where I had 3 hours where the clouds cleared in the middle of the night, I wanted to shoot during those 3 hours. If it was going to rain at 2 a.m., but it was clear at the start of the night, I wanted to shoot up until then. So that was really my primary motivation in trying to come up with an automation solution here. I also wanted to minimize babysitting. You know, I'm getting older, and as much as I love sitting out under the stars until the wee hours of the morning, I don't want to be out there past 11 o'clock or so, because I'm going to bed. And you get these minus 15 degree nights, and I don't want to be out there for those either. So I really wanted to minimize my babysitting, sitting there scope side. Of course, I wanted to improve the quality of data that I was capturing, and I'll tell you how I think I've achieved that. And this is primarily for the remote location. I wanted to disconnect the time of day that I had to be involved from the time of day that operations were occurring. I'm dealing with different time zones here, and I didn't want to be up at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to work on the telescope out there in New Mexico. So that break between the time that I have to be involved and when the scope is doing things was important to me as well. So I'll jump to the end here and give you a little bit about my results. I've been running in my backyard observatory since August of 2020, fully automated. On a nightly basis, I touch nothing. I simply define the targets that I want to shoot and how I want them shot. And the software that I'm using decides when to shoot, what to shoot, what's the best target for each hour of shooting, what's the best filter to be using at that time. The next morning, I log in, check the frames that were shot, reject anything that I don't like. The software adjusts to any frames that I've rejected, and that's it. I'm not involved in the day-to-day operation, and the software has been running literally out there, has been running for months untouched. The quality of my images has improved dramatically because I'm shooting when targets are high in the sky, and I'm shooting the best, the best target that I should be shooting at that time, instead of just sitting on one target all night long. And surprisingly, the amount of images that I'm completing has increased as well, because I'm making use of these small little windows whenever I happen to get them. So here's a couple of the images that I produced in this way. You guys don't want to look at my images, but I just thought I'd pop them up there real quick. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, first we're going to talk about the equipment that I'm using, not only my telescope, but the equipment to actually automate the observatory. We'll go through that just so you understand what it is we're working with. And then we're going to discuss the image capture software that I'm using, and more importantly, how I'm using it. And finally, we'll talk about some customization that I did, some custom software that I wrote that kind of puts the finishing touches on this automation project. And I want you to understand that I'm certainly not suggesting that this is the right solution for anybody except me. I know that we all have different, needs, wants, and desires. And so I'm not suggesting that you go out and build exactly what I've done, but maybe when you see what I'm doing here, maybe it kicks off, a thought for you that, I could do something similar, or, give you a good idea on how you might be able to do something similar. So that's really the goal, not to have you implement exactly what I've done. So here in Pittsburgh, I'm running a Takahashi TOA 130, which is a 5-inch refractor. I use a CMOS camera, QHY 600, an Optec focuser on a 10-micron mount. Out in New Mexico, I've got his big brother, a TOA 150, 1100 millimeter refractor. I use a CCD out there, an SBIG STXL 16200. An FLI focuser, and also on 10 micron. I just had first light on that scope in February, and it's been running very well. So really excited about that. So here's an image of my observatory. It's just a small 8x10 roll-off roof design. I went with a small observatory so I could avoid building permits here in the township that I live in. That's a challenge. So if it's small enough, you don't need a building permit for it. So that's what dictated the size of my observatory for me. We started construction in July of 2020. I had a general contractor do the heavy construction, and I did all the finish work. And of course, I did everything inside. So as I said, weather is my primary limiting factor here, and so I had to find a way to deal with monitoring the weather and reacting to changing weather conditions. And so the solution that I chose was from a company called Interactive Astronomy. It's called SkyAlert. This is just a mini weather monitoring station. It monitors wind and rain and temperature and clouds and all that kind of good stuff, and creates a weather data file out on a network share that is consumed by the software that I'm using for doing the imaging. So it's a very simple, very clean way to get the data. I'm just going to back up here for a second. It sits right here. I don't know if you can make it out, but right here on the corner of the roll-off roof tracks, there's a pole, and the SkyAlert is just sitting right up top there, just a little bit higher than the roof, so that the roof doesn't interfere with it. But that's where that is. The user interface for SkyAlert looks like this. You get a window with current conditions where it shows you ambient temperature and sky temperature and dew point, yada, yada, yada. And you can bring up a graph to show, a historical log of what those have been. You can see here, when did I take this? February. It says February 10th. You can see here what I'm talking about, where I get a couple hours and then it, went into cloudy. This blue line, when it's up in the gray, that means it's cloudy. So, we had a couple hours clear on this night, and then it was cloudy for 3 days since that. So, it's pretty typical of the kind of weather that I fight here, especially in the wintertime. Another product from Interactive Astronomy that I'm using is something to drive the roof, and that's called SkyRoof. SkyRoof is a hardware solution. There's a little Arduino processor here in this box. The sky roof integrates with a motor. I'm using an Eleco gate motor to drive my roof, and it is responsible for controlling that, for opening and closing the roof. It can directly consume the weather data file that you get from Sky Alert if you don't want to use a computer to drive all this stuff. But I happen to be using a computer, so it's the Sky Roof is not directly consuming it for me, but you do have that option. This is the gate motor that I'm using. It's kind of mounted inverted, and it's mounted to the wall and to the floor in the observatory. And you have this black toothed track that you see right there that's connected to the roof itself. And if you look here, if you're looking from the side, you can just see that that gear there from the gate motor that engages that track. And when Sky Roof tells it to open, it opens the roof, and it takes about 15 seconds to open my 10-foot roof. There are sensors in the front and the back of the observatory. That's what this gray box is right here. This one happens to be the closed sensor. So the closed sensor's in the back of the observatory, and the open sensor's in the front. And this red piece is a magnet. And as the observatory roof moves, from one to the other, when the Sky Roof system sees the magnet pass over the sensor, then it knows that the observatory is open when it's opening. It knows it's closed when it's closing. So pretty simple, pretty efficient. There's also a photo, and I don't have it pictured here, but we'll see it later. There's a photo cell and a relay and a piece of reflective tape on the telescope that tells Sky Roof when my telescope is in a parked position, when it's safe to open and close the roof. If the telescope isn't parked, it won't allow the roof to open. And I do have my telescope parked in a horizontal fashion so that the roof can open and close over top of it. That's how I set that up. For power, there are two pieces of equipment that I'm using. I'm using an Ultimate Power Box version 2 that sits on top of the telescope. It's very small. It looks huge in this picture, but it's not very big at all. It's a small little box, and it gives me 12-volt DC outputs to power the camera and the filter wheel and the focuser and all those kinds of things. There are dew heater outputs on there to drive the dew heaters. There's a constant 12-volt output that powers the computer that we're going to talk about next. And there are 4 USB 3 and 2 USB 2 ports on there. All of these things can be controlled through software, so I can turn power outputs on and off. I can turn USB ports on and off, all through the software that I'm using. It also has weather monitors for temperature and dew point. That's how it runs the dew heaters. And incidentally, I've given you the website addresses for all of these products. And if you happen to miss one and need something, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be glad to help you out if you can't find it. The other thing that I'm using for power, and this is for AC power, is this thing's called a web power switch from Digital Loggers, Inc. And again, this is controllable through software, and I can turn on or off any of these individually switched 15 amp circuits. And so this is what I use to, power the mount, turn the mount on and off, turn the gate motors on and off, that kind of thing. The computer that I use is an inexpensive little Intel i3 NUC. Runs Windows 10. It's got 8 gig of memory, 120 gig hard drive on it, and these things go for $270 on Amazon. So it's a very inexpensive solution. This sits on the scope as well, right above the Ultimate Power Box. It makes for a really neat installation because the Ultimate Power Box really limits the number of cables that have to run to ground. Everything's staying up there on the scope, and only power has to go, down to ground from the telescope. I use a USB controlled flat panel for taking flats. This way I can, control the brightness from the software. I've mounted the panel on a, on a wooden stand that sits in front of the telescope when it's parked. And so you see that here. This is, as I was explaining before, this is that little black this little black box right here is that photocell relay that looks for the telescope when it's in a parked position. So unless the telescope is horizontal like this, the roof can't open or close. So that's what that is. Right here, you can just kind of make out that tinge of blue. That's the ultimate power box, and the computer sitting on top of it, sitting right up there on the telescope. So all the wiring to the camera, to the filter wheel, to the focuser, all of that stays up there on the telescope, doesn't have to go to ground. Any questions about hardware or any of that stuff?
Nothing yet, Tim, so
Okay, good.
continue.
Good. All right, so let's talk about software. The software that I was using when I was setting up in my driveway, and I did that for a little more than a year, was terrific, but it really just didn't lend itself to a fully automated setup. It just wasn't designed for that. And so I kind of sat down and thought about what I needed from a piece of software in order to do this automation. And of course, I needed to control my cameras and mount and all that good stuff. I needed to be able to control the observatory automation hardware for the roof and the weather monitor. I needed to be able to control power for the connected devices because I wanted to be able to, turn things on and off through software. It had to run reliably. It doesn't do me any good if the software crashes at 2 o'clock in the morning and I blow an imaging session. So it had to be bulletproof. Of course, it had to allow for unattended operation, and I didn't want to break the bank. So I went and looked around, and ultimately the software that I chose was Voyager. I tested with multiple solutions, and I just thought that Voyager, gave me the best overall answer. It provided for all the equipment that I wanted to control. It had the most functionality out of the box for the things that I was comparing it against. I thought it was extremely reasonably priced. I think it's like 160 euro or something like that. It's not tremendously expensive. It allowed for user automation right out of the box, and it's very, very reliable. I got to tell you, it's bulletproof. Like I said, I've been running it for months, untouched. I don't have to do anything to it. It really performs well. There's an optional add-on called Viking that can be used to control all of the I/O. So, turning power outputs on and off, turning USB ports on or off. I do that all through Viking. And it includes a web dashboard that allows you to, view and monitor the operations while it's going on. So I can, look at it from my phone when I'm sitting in my living room watching television. I can log in and see what's going on. So the software is written by an Italian company. This is their website here, software.starkeeper.it. Gentleman by the name of Leonardo Orazzi is the author, the main author, and terrific guy, very, very helpful. I've been really happy with the experience that I've had with them. Some things from their website, and these are all the things that he connects with, the cameras and mounts and focusers and domes and all that kind of stuff, and all these other pieces of software, the things that we're all used to seeing, we're all used to using. There are lots and lots of features and functions for this software, and we could go through them all, but really there was a presentation done here on the Astro Imaging channel about Voyager not too long ago, where the gentleman went through all of the screens and all the features and all the functions of the software. And so we won't rehash all of that stuff here tonight. Certainly Wanda will help us find that when we need to find that presentation if we need to get there. But I'll just give you an overview of a couple of the screens that are out there, just so that, if you haven't seen that presentation, you just get a little touch point here. But I would encourage you to take a look at it. It was a good presentation. I did watch it. So this is where you set up your profile. So I don't know if you can see all these tabs here. I know it's kind of small to try and fit all this on the screen, but this is where you set up your camera and your mount and your guiding and a planetarium software and plate solving and autofocusing, and all these things are, kind of going across here. So this is where you come in to configure all of your equipment. It does support a very, very extensive list of equipment. It also interfaces well with a lot of other pieces of software that we're used to using, planetarium software, and it interfaces with Maxim, it interfaces with the sky, is with PhD2, focusing software like Focus Max and AtFocus, pinpoint plate solve, ASTAP, all kinds of stuff. So there's plenty of functionality for connecting to the equipment that you're using. I think focusing is one of the things that Voyager does better than anything else that I've used. And I've tried them all the normal players that you guys are all, used to using and hearing about out there. I tested them all, and I really think they have the best solution to focusing. Their system is called RoboFocus. It focuses on a single star or a field of stars, although the single star is the faster way of doing it. But what they do is they build a V-curve, a one-time V-curve as part of setup that characterizes your focuser and your camera and your telescope. And then at runtime, when it actually goes out to focus, it just takes a couple of points so that it finds where it is on the V-curve. And once it knows where it is on the curve, it can jump right to focus and be done. I do a lot of narrowband imaging because I'm here in Pittsburgh and we have a lot of light pollution. And I use 3 nanometer filters. And focusing with the actual filter that I'm going to shoot with, it usually focuses in minute 20, minute 30. Seconds. So it's really fast. It's very accurate because I'm always focusing with the filter that I'm going to actually shoot, and I'm really happy with it. All that being said, if you prefer Focus Max or focusing with the sky or Maxim, you can use those as well. So if you're using that focus in the sky, you can do that as well. But the focusing routines here in Voyager are really fantastic. There's an image viewer that, so as you're shooting, your images will pop up in the image viewer, and you can mess around with stretches and all that kind of stuff that you're used to doing, zoom in and out, crosshairs.
Tim,
Sir.
as soon as I said there weren't any questions, of course.
Of course.
So Greg was asking about the weight that's on your mount and on the scope, and doesn't that affect like things like guiding or anything else in operation? And how much does that whole setup weigh?
Well, I'd have to check it. I think it's right around 34 pounds or something like that for this whole setup. The 10 micron GM1000 that I'm using here easily supports up to 50 pounds. It's a very, very accurate scope. It has encoders in it. So that it very accurately measures its position, and it always knows what its position is in the sky. I've shot this thing as long as 20 minutes unguided, so I don't even have to guide. I do guide just because I'm a fuss budget, and I like to make sure that I'm doing the best job that I possibly can, and it doesn't cost me anything, so why not? But like I said, I've shot 20-minute unguided exposures with this particular setup right here and had nice round pinpoint stars.
How much do you have to customize Voyager? Do you have to write scripts, or are they all pre-written for you?
Well, actually, that's what we're going to be talking about here tonight. So
we can skip that question.
Yeah, I'm going to skip that question. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Someone asked, who makes the park interlock system?
Who makes that all came from Skyroof. It was all part of the Skyroof package that I got from Interactive Astronomy. So that's actually, and I don't know if you can see it here in this image. I know it's very small, but there's a little cable that it's a long cable, so I have it coiled up. But there's a cable here that runs from the photocell relay right into the Skyroof box. It's part of that system. It's not something additional that you have to add on.
And I saw you had a single V curve. Now, my experience is that if you use Focus Max, you run multiple V curves in order to get some kind of reasonable average. Or is this really the same thing but in a different format?
Yeah. So what he does when he runs it, and I say what Voyager does when Voyager runs is it takes many, many, many images at each point in the V curve and settles in on the average, I believe is how they're how they're doing it. And so this one curve is really used to characterize the movement of the focuser, and it's more about the movement of the focuser than it is about a specific focus setting.
How does that adjust temperature?
I'm sorry.
Someone,
Sure.
there's one more question, Sean.
How does that adjust with temperature?
Yeah. So
Technology is hugely dependent on temperature.
yes. And so when you set up, and we're going to talk about setting up for the sequence, but what I do is in the setup of the sequence, I say for every 2 degrees of temperature change, I want to refocus.
So but if it's looking at a point on the curve and automatically adjusting to like how does it? Do you have like temperature compensation trained or something?
No, I don't. I don't do any temperature comp training at all. Like I said, when the temp, I let it focus. It gets to a point that it's focused and it starts shooting. At that point, it knows what the temperature was when it focused. I have it set for 2 degrees. You can set it for anything, but if it changes by 2 degrees C, it triggers the system to refocus. So it would just go off and refocus and then go back to shooting again.
But the question becomes, how did you know to set it to every 2 degrees to change?
Well, no. The question is like, because you said it does the long run with all the points once, and then after that it looks at like it takes an image, sees where you're at focus wise, and then brings you back down to the bottom of the curve. But the bottom of that curve is going to be in a different place if it's a different temperature.
Yeah. So the curve is more about characterization of the motion of the telescope. So this point could be anywhere, right? Based on temperature and all that. Exactly. It's the shape of the curve. So he'll take a couple of points here and a couple of points here and say, all right, I know where I am. And then that means I've got to get to this point here. And that's how he jumps to it.
So it's actually, it's the slope of the curve. It's the slope of the down, not really the shape. So there was another question. I assume you do individual filter focusing. You don't use offsets, right?
That's correct. I don't use offsets at all.
And Greg asked about the cost of the software. I assume he means more than Voyager, which we already got on the chat.
Yeah, the cost of Voyager is like I forget what it is. It's like 160 or 170 euros, something like that. The Viking software that we've added on for the Switch IO stuff, I think is another 50 or 60 euro, something like that. And that's it. That's all the software that I've paid for. So we're under $300, well under $300.
And actually, one more question from Rich: will Voyager perform well in Arizona, dry, hot, and cold climates? I assume that doesn't make any difference. But
yeah, I'm running in New Mexico and it's doing great. It's a little cold out there now, but yeah, I ran it here in 90-degree high humidity days in Pittsburgh through the summer last year, and now in the wintertime we're down to 10 degrees at night, and I don't really think the ambient temperature affects the software all that much.
Okay, those are all the questions I have. Do you have something?
Yeah, I've got one here. Matthew Ray is asking if there's any special tips you have on the height of the walls in your observatory. Why did you build them that tall? Why did you put the scope where you did, and those kinds of things? What questions did you ask yourself?
Sure. So what I did when I was laying this out in my mind and on my napkin that I was sitting there doodling on, and this was the first time that I'd ever done it, so I'm sure I did something wrong. But the way that I did it was I decided that I wanted the roof, and let me go back here to the picture of the observatory. Too far. Come on. Go back. There we go. Okay. So I wanted to make sure that the slope of the roof was away from the observatory when it was open. So in other words, I didn't want the peak of the roof to be on this side because I didn't want to cut off that much of the northern view of the sky. The roof moves to the north in this image. So as you're looking at it, this is the northern direction. So I made sure that the roof was sloping this way, and I didn't have the peak in the middle here. And what I did was I took my telescope and pier that I was going to use, or my mount and my pier, and I cocked the mount over 90 degrees, like you see it here, and I measured the height of the mount plus pier, so I knew what ultimately, where the roof had to clear, and I added 12 inches, I think, onto that, so that my roof was a little bit higher than where the mount would be parked, and that's how I set the height of the wall. And then I just put a little roof on with enough slope there that I thought the water was going to drain off well from there. So that's how I figured out the height of the walls. And as far as the size goes, as I said, I was trying to stay away from the need for building permits, and so I measured how far the back of the telescope was from the mount. I used that to come up with a distance that I wanted to be away from the walls, and so that's how I figured out the area that I wanted to have.
Yeah, I work with a facility that's got about 25 roll-off sheds, and everybody's got a little bit of different philosophy as to just how high their pier should be and where their scope should be. And that ranges from pretty much what Tim just described to make sure that you put that pier low enough, and the walls are all pretty much a fixed height anyway, but you put the pier low enough so that no matter what happens, you can always roll the pier, or you always roll the roof closed. Even if the telescope is stalled and it's sitting there, you can still roll the roof closed. So it's not an easy question to answer. I should say that I know that astrophysics has a spreadsheet where you can enter all your variables in there for their mounts, and probably adaptable to other people's mounts. Now, we've had some more questions coming in since then. Tim, go back to where
Sure.
you've got your slanting roof, and it's Pittsburgh, and it's been snowing for 4 or 5 days. And who was it that Kenward Vaughn asks? And it's been snowing. You got to wait for the snow to get off before you roll that roof, right?
Well,
Otherwise,
actually,
snow's gonna pop.
Actually, I thought of that. And, so this is a metal roof on my observatory, and they sell heating systems that go under a metal roof. And so there's a wire under the roof material that kind of makes serpentines all across the roof on either side. And it's activated by temperature. So when the temperature drops enough, it just keeps it, warm enough to melt the snow. And I don't know if you can actually see it, but there's a gutter right along this side, so that when the roof is open, I don't have water dripping into my observatory. There's a gutter that drains it off the back. Off the front, I don't care. There's no gutter on the front. You can even see a pile of snow here from when I took the picture, that there was still a bit of ice left over, because obviously it's water when it's rolling off, and then it freezes, and so that lasted longer than anything else. So I did think of that. Also in the rails. And I don't know if I don't think I have an image that shows it, but the way the roof moves is it's the wheels have a V cut in them, and the track is sort of a peaked V like this. And under that peak, what I did was I took something called a heat wire. Heat wire is used to keep your pipes from freezing, and you kind of wrap it around your pipe. And again, it automatically activates when the temperature gets too cold. But I took that heat wire and I ran it up through that V groove all the way up. So as soon as it gets cold enough, that turns on, and it keeps the observatory ice free. Now, when it's that cold and when there's that much snow, I kind of shut it down anyway and don't let it run, because I don't want to take any chances. But I did make sure that we keep all the snow off of there.
What Rich Assay wants to know, was this pretty much a stick-built observatory, or did you modify a prefabricated shed or anything like that?
No. I built this, with raw material, raw lumber.
Yeah.
2x4s and plywood, and out we went.
JC's asking if you've had critters.
So I actually listened to a presentation on the astroimaging channel that talked a lot about critters in my observatory.
Yeah.
And I got really, really concerned about that because I didn't want little Mises getting in there and chewing up all my wires, and I didn't want it to be real buggy. And so what I did under the floor of the observatory, the floor is, I don't know if I have any images of it here, probably not. But oh, there you go. So the floor are, just regular old 1x6 flooring, and you can see there's space in there because I wanted the building to be able to breathe, but I didn't want to leave that open to the world. And so there's a heavy copper mesh that runs under the floor, and all of the flooring is screwed down into that heavy copper mesh. So nobody's coming up through there. No one's coming up through the floor.
Okay, why don't we proceed with the prepared presentation for a while?
Well, I have one more question.
Shoot.
Do you have video monitors in there so you can see what's going on?
I just bought the camera, so I haven't hung it yet. But yeah, I just
with all the
camera.
automation, it's always nice to take a look and see what's going on.
Yeah, so I just bought the camera, and what slowed me down is I wanted to tie the camera into the rest of the cameras that I have here in my home. And the only cameras that were sold by the company have an infrared light in them for night. And so of course I didn't want that, out there, blasting IR at my telescope. So I had to find something that was going to work and be able to see at night and not blast a bunch of infrared everywhere. So that slowed me down a little bit.
Okay, I'm all set. Alex?
No, let's go back to the show.
Okay, where was I? I wasn't that far. I was here. I was on RoboClip. Okay, RoboClip is a database that is included in Voyager, and it's just a way for you to keep track of targets and framing. So you can put in the targets that you want to shoot and how you want to have them framed, and then you can pull from this list in other places in the program. Nifty little feature there. If you want to sit there and run Voyager like you would maybe Sequence Generator Pro or Nina or some of these other packages where it's attended operation where you're sitting there with the computer and with the telescope, you can certainly do that in Voyager. It has all that same functionality. It's very, very functional. It works really well. Excuse me. Let me mute. So attended operation is something that that the software provides for. It's not how I use the software, but it is there. It is available. Sequence files. This is where we're going to start talking about how I'm doing things and what I'm using. And so the sequence file is, and you're probably familiar with it from other packages because they have similar things. But the sequence file is where you define the target that you want to shoot, how you want to have it framed. So the RA and deck and rotation. I don't use a rotator, but if you do, you have the ability to control rotation angle. And these are called slots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can have as many as you want. And in each slot, you put in a filter that you want to shoot, the exposure, binning. If you're using a CCD, you can set speeds and readout modes if those are appropriate. CMOS users, gain and offset, and a number of subs to shoot. And so this is the target that we're going to shoot, and this is how we're going to shoot it. And then down below are lots of things to control the rest of the sequence. So here on the sequence tab, it's, where do you want to store the files? And constraints are things like it has to be over a certain altitude or between certain times or certain RA, those kinds of things. This is where you can define a cooling plan, set up for plate solving, meridian flip, how you're going to guide. Your focus plan is all defined here. So all of that stuff is in this thing called a sequence file. And this is the sequence file editor. Excuse me one second. Okay, sorry, I got a tickle in my throat and I'm going to be coughing at you all night. I apologize. So anyway, these sequence files can be used either for attended operation, if you're sitting there watching it, or unattended operation, which is how I use it. Drag script is where the power of Voyager really shows and really shines. Drag script is scripting facility that gives you the power to automate your entire imaging session. These can be very simple. I just want to run a single sequence, to something that's a little more complex where you're starting up equipment and syncing telescopes and all that kind of stuff, to something very complex where, like I'm doing, you have unattended operation of an observatory for an extended period of time. You can also do creative things like build pointing models, shoot dark libraries, whatever you can do. It's really easy to create these. There's a kind of a drag and drop user interface where you're dropping pre-built blocks into this script. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this tonight, because I think this is the real power of the application and what I wanted to focus on. This is, what the editor looks like, where you edit a drag script. And I'm actually going to pull a Bill Gates and try and do this live. And so when it screws up, you can all laugh at me later. But we'll go into my telescope here, and I'll pull up the drag script editor. I'm so sorry. But anyway, to create that little script that we were just looking at, I would just take, we want to start with connecting setup. So I'm just going to take that and drag it over here and drop it in. That's going to connect our telescopes and mounts and cameras and filter wheels and all that. And then we want to shoot a sequence. And when I drag this over here and drop it, it's going to be red, telling me that I need to configure that. And I double click on it, and it says, what sequence file do you want to shoot? And I can say, well, let's use this sequence file that I have out here. And I want to start right away and shoot all night. And that's all that we need there. And then when I'm done, when it's done shooting the sequence, I want to use the good night function. That's going to, take us back to our L filter and warm up the camera and park the scope. And if you're using a flat device, you can close the flat device cover. So that's it. It's pretty simple. To use this drag and drop interface. The hard part is learning what all these little functions are and what they do and how they work. So I won't sugarcoat it. There's a bit of a learning curve to come up to speed on this, but there's a ton of information on their wiki out on their website, and lots and lots of examples, and of course a bunch of nerds like me that are more than willing to help you out. So let's look at a little more complex example. And this one, what we're going to do is we're going to wait for dark. We're going to connect up all of our equipment. We're going to cool off the camera, open the roof, sync the mount, calibrate an auto guider, and then we'll run 3 different sequences. We'll run one target from the start of the night until midnight. We'll run another target from midnight to 3 a.m. and a third target from 3 a.m. to dawn. When we're all done, we're going to shut everything down and close the roof. So this is what we're going to try and build, okay? The first thing we would do is create 3 different sequence files, one for each target that we're going to shoot in each one of these 3 time slots. And each one of those should be a target that's at an appropriate altitude during those time slots. And we're going to define the filters and exposures of how we're going to shoot them in an autofocus plan and plate solving and meridian flips and all that kind of stuff. All of that's done in the sequence files, and they're saved out onto the disk. Okay. Then we create a drag script that looks like this. And this is just an example. Now, we're certainly not going to go through every line of this and explain them all in detail, but I'll just kind of give you an overview of how this works and what we do. So up here at the top, the first thing we do is wait for astronomical night. We're going to wait until 45 minutes before astronomical night, because I'm going to get a head start on setting some things up. So we're going to wait 45 minutes before astronomical night, and then we're going to connect our setup. If that works, it'll jump down here to initial setup block. If that doesn't work, it'll wait 15 minutes and try again. If it tries 3 times and continues to fail, then it'll fall through and eventually send. Now I'm using the email functionality in Voyager, along with the fact that I use Verizon for my cell phone. And you may not know this, but if you send an email to your phone number at vtext.com, it'll come through to your phone as a text message. So I use that as a way to send myself text messages from the telescope. So if this thing fails 3 times, it'll send me a text message that said something failed and it'll quit. Assuming that it passes, we'll come down here to initial setup, where we're going to open the flat device cover. We will cool down the camera, and then we'll sit here and wait until a half an hour before astronomical night. When we get to a half an hour before, it'll continue on and we'll open the roof. That's what this open shutter function does. And we'll unpark the telescope and we'll go to a place high in the sky and we'll start tracking, and we'll do a blind solve and sync the mount. And then we can, then we'll, if that passes, then we'll jump down here to calibrate, where we're going to calibrate the auto guider. Now, I don't do this every night, but you can. And so I just wanted to throw this in there and show it to you, but we'll go to a certain place in the sky that's appropriate for guiding, and just tell Voyager to calibrate the guider. I use PhD2 to guide here in Pittsburgh, and I use the Sky out in New Mexico. So, it interfaces with both of those for guiding and others as well. Okay, so we're through guiding, and now we're ready to go down to this where it says block sequence 1. So we're going to go into sequence 1. I'm going to go to the next page where I collapse all of this. So I don't want to lose you here as this jumps around. So we just collapsed all the stuff that we were just looking at, and now we're here at sequence 1. We say we want to run a sequence. We're going to start it right away. We're going to end at midnight, and it's sequence 1 is the name of the file where I've stored the target that I want to shoot, and the filters and the exposures and all that kind of stuff are in this file. If that's okay, it's going to jump down to sequence 2. If it's not, it's going to send me a text message and say something died. If it's okay, we're going to start immediately on sequence 2, which it's now midnight, right? Because we did this until midnight. So now we're going to start this one, and we're going to run that till 3 a.m. and we're going to shoot sequence 2. And when that one finishes, we're going to jump down here to sequence 3, and we're going to start right away, and we're going to run this until dawn, and we're going to run sequence 3, the target and filters that are in the sequence 3 file. And when all that's done, it'll come down here to terminate session, where we warm up the camera, park the telescope, set it to the L filter, close the flat device cover, close the roof, disconnect setup, and send me a text message saying we're done. We just ran our whole night's imaging in an automated fashion, and we didn't do anything but press the button and tell it to go. Okay. Any questions in there? I'm sure I probably lost somebody along the way.
There are a couple questions that have popped up.
Shoot.
Let's see. What about guide stars? I know you have a reasonably wide field. Do you worry about having a guide star there, and what do you do about that?
So it actually has a facility called RoboGuide that's built into Voyager, and I didn't talk about this. I'm sorry, but it has a facility called RoboGuide where it will select the guide star, for you, and pass that guide star information over to whatever it is that you're using for guiding. If there are stars that you don't want it to use, you can filter those out, but I never do. I let it do it, and it always does a great job of picking a guide star, and off it goes. You're right, I do have a pretty wide field, but I've never had an issue with it. And prior to using my Takahashi, I was using an Edge HD SCT scope, and it was about, what are they, 20, 30 millimeters. And with an OAG, and it did fine with that as well, which is obviously a much smaller field of view than what I have on the talk.
Okay, this is a question probably jumping ahead. Rich says, does Voyager do any stacking for you, pre-processing?
It does not. It does not. Its job is to shoot the images, but it's not doing any real-time stacking, any live stacking, anything like that. No.
And this may be an unfair question, but what does Voyager do that SGP doesn't? Or do you you must have compared them when you first,
I did, and it was SGP that I was using before this. And so I don't want to speak badly of SGP. I had a great experience using SGP. I'm not taking any shots at it by any stretch, but the flexibility that I have here in Voyager is just so much greater. SGP does what SGP does. And as long as you fit within that box of how SGP operates, then you're fine. And there isn't anything wrong with SGP. I'm not taking any shots at it by any stretch. But you don't have the ability to do the kinds of things that I'm doing here. And when we take the next step, which we're getting to, you're going to see how I really took the flexibility that I have here in Voyager with DragScript and really took it to the next level. And the functionality that I have there, there's just no way I was going to achieve with SGP. Now, you might ask the same question about Nina. At the time that I did this evaluation, I would have had a similar answer. I know that work a lot on improving their software, and they did a complete rewrite of their sequencing part of their software that is much more similar to what DragScript does. I don't know it. I haven't used it, but I think they're moving in the same direction to kind of, go after the sort of flexibility and functionality that you have in an application like Voyager.
You might ask the same question about ACP, setting the price issue aside.
That was the big one for ACP. So since I was running multiple telescopes and I had to buy Maxim and I had to buy Focus Max, the numbers just started stacking up. I think ACP is a great piece of software. I don't have a bad thing to say about it, other than the fact that if I could do it for less than $300 and I can run up to 3 telescopes on it for that $300, which is how the license works for Voyager. You can run up to 3 systems. It made sense to try that first. And because I was able to do what I needed, there was no reason for me to take the step and use ACP.
Okay. I think we're all set for now.
Okay. So the one thing that we didn't talk about yet is how we respond to the weather events. We talked about Sky Alert and it monitoring the weather, and so how do we respond to that? What do we do about it, right? So Voyager has what it calls events, and events are things that happen asynchronously, so not top down like we've been looking at our script, but these things can happen at any time. Clouds can come over at any time, right? So when you set up the weather monitor, you can set up the event that you want to raise for a given weather condition. So as an example, if it gets cloudy or very cloudy, I say I want to raise the suspend event. When it goes back to clear, I want to raise the resume event. Same thing with wind. If it gets windy or very windy, I say suspend. Now, suspend means pause. Suspend means, hey, do what you need to do to put the telescope back in a safe position, and then just sit there and cool it and wait and see if the condition clears and goes away, right? You also have the ability to exit. Exit means stop. Just quit. We're done. We're not doing anything more. Shut everybody down. We're done. And I could just as easily have said, for example, under very cloudy, I could have said exit here, but that's not how I use it. I just force the thing to sit there and pause whenever I get one of these weather events happening, like if it starts to rain or if, like I say, it gets windy or cloudy. Okay. We write the handler for those things at the end of our drag script. So this is the same script that we were working with before. I just collapsed all these blocks. And down here at the bottom is where we have these events. And so when the suspend event gets raised, it's going to sit here and wait until either we get a resume event or the end of night occurs. So that's what this line means. And when it says suspend, we're going to stop the guiding. We're going to park the scope. We're going to close the roof, and we're going to sit there and twiddle our thumbs, wait and see if something happens to clear it. If the weather condition clears, then we're going to open the roof back up. We're going to unpark the scope, and we're going to go back to work or jump right back to our sequence 1 block where it'll fall into the time slot that we had that was appropriate and go back to shooting. If the exit event gets raised, then, park the telescope, close the roof, warm up the camera, and shut everybody down. So these things can happen anytime, and they happen outside of the normal operation, right? You're going along doing your work, shooting your sequence, and all of a sudden clouds come over. Whoops, it raises suspend. This guy will say, stop guiding, park the scope, and sit here and wait. Is that clear as mud? All right. You're not throwing an alarm, so I'm going to keep going. So on a continuing basis, do you write that script every day? Heck no. That's too much work. That's not how you use this. Typically what you would do is write your script and make it work the way you want it to work, and just reuse that every night of shooting. And in our example, I had a couple of sequence files in there that we were going to shoot. And so on a daily basis, you would just go into those sequence files and change the target, or change, maybe I have enough L frames, but I still need to shoot more RGB. So I'll take the L frame out of this sequence file and just let it shoot RGB. However, whatever happens, whatever you want to change, or maybe this target is done. So I'm gonna take out the target that I'm shooting for the first part of the night, and I'm going to put in a new target and start shooting something else. So you would just go in and maintain those sequence files, and the same drag script would be used over and over and over again. Okay. You could also do this differently. And of course, this was just an example, just to kind of give you a flavor for it. But you could use things like altitude of targets to dictate when to shoot and what to shoot. There are lots of different things that you can do. There are limits in there for RA and things like that. So if you have an obstruction that you want to be able to shoot around, you can do those kinds of things. The point here is to be creative with it, and be able to and tweak it to suit what it is you want to do. All right. So we just asked any questions, but I'll ask one more time real quick. Any more, Eric?
Yeah, you seem to have stimulated a lot of questions, Tim. Let's see.
I'm good at that.
Is there any kind of a script checker to make sure you've written a script that may or may not run?
Yes. If you do it wrong, it comes up and turns red while you're doing it, right there in real time while you're doing it. So it will keep you from making immediate errors. There's also a debug function in the script editor. Let me see if I can show you that. So that little bug right there, you can open the script with a simulator and run through and watch it, and it runs at high speed, so you can run through and watch it and see how it works. That's what that is. Okay.
Is there support for Boltwood cloud sensor?
Yes. I'm using SkyAlert, but it supports Boltwood. It's there's another one too, and I forget what it is. But yeah, they support a couple of different ones.
Does Voyager interface with a weather app, or does your observatory just use its sensors?
Yeah, so my observatory just uses its sensors, but you can interface with what is that, Open Weather Map, and pull all that stuff in there. There's a whole configuration for setup of those things outside of the weather setup that I showed you, which is for the SkyAlert.
And I guess there's a question you kind of commented on it earlier, and what you're doing seems, I don't want to say complicated, but as you said, a really steep learning curve. So for us average imagers that are not necessarily computer nerds, not that you're a computer nerd, Tim.
No, I am, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it.
So
nerds rule.
What do you think the learning curve is to be able to make these scripts the way they really run, and to have all the functionality that goes with it?
Well, so obviously the first script that you write is not going to be the script that you and I just looked at, right? It's just not. So I'll give you an example. There's a fella that I'm working with right now, that I'm helping right now, and he's been using Voyager for a couple of weeks, just using the attended operation and just getting used to how the software works and what it does. And that's probably the first step. Use that for a couple of imaging sessions or a couple of weeks or whatever it takes to get you comfortable with it. And then start dabbling with small little drag scripts like the first one that I showed you that just has a couple of lines in it, and then grow naturally. And that progression obviously will be time different for other people, but for me, it was almost like an avalanche in the very beginning. I had, I'm getting older, so it's sometimes it's hard to get something through that thick head of mine. And when I first looked at it and when I first started, I thought, nah, this isn't the software for me. And to be honest with you, I eliminated it before I came back and ultimately selected it, because it was just so different. And it is very different than what I was doing with SGP, as in my example. So I would say there is a bit of a learning curve, and once you get through the first little bits of it, then it starts to snowball and really pick up speed, and it really becomes familiar, and to the point that now when I look at it, it's just obvious. It just makes immense sense. So there's a learning curve with anything, with any software that you're using. I don't think Voyager's any different. It may be a little longer of a learning curve if you're going to try and do some of the complicated stuff that I showed you in this script, which was a big one, but certainly not insurmountable. And as I said, and I touched on this earlier, and maybe I have my browser up. I do. So I'll try and show you this real quickly. Let's see if I can find it.
If you guys think this is complicated, wait 5 minutes.
Tim, are you still there?
Oh, he dropped out.
Uh-oh, we lost Tim. He'll be back.
Yeah, we'll just give him a couple minutes to. Oh, there he is.
Oh,
You're
Tim,
muted, Tim.
there you go.
Sorry about that. My bad. I went back and tried to pull something up on my browser and didn't realize I was going to close the share. I'm sorry. But anyway, there's a wiki available, and that's what I was about to show you. But you'll just have to take my word for it for now. There's a wiki available where they give lots and lots of examples of these drag scripts and how to write them. And I found it to be very, very easy to go through and follow. So, Eric, I hope that answers your question.
Well, I mean, the learning curve can't be any steeper than, say, PixInsight, which I think most all of us.
Not even close. Yeah, not even close.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So up to now, everything that I've shown you comes out of the box, comes right out of the box from Voyager, and all of the operations in my observatory could be run just like that. But as I said a minute ago, I'm a computer nerd and proud of it. I spent a lot of years writing software, and this is no exception. And I decided to take on a little hobby project just so that I can make sure that I stayed out of my wife's hair for a little longer. And so what I wanted to do was automate the whole process. As I said in the beginning of the presentation, where I'm not touching a thing. I don't do anything. It's a completely automated robot. And so the way I wanted to approach it was I wanted to define rules around lunar separation, lunar illumination, the minimum object altitude, the transit for the, a transit window for the object, and a user controllable priority, excuse me. And then I wanted to define the targets that I want to shoot. And I wanted the software to decide at runtime what it is I should be shooting right now. How can I make the best use of this window of opportunity that I have? And then the next day, I wanted to log in and see what I shot and throw out the bad guys. So that's what I built. There's really three parts to this solution. There's what I call the astrophotography scheduler, where I define the rules and the targets that I want to shoot. There's a program called getSeq.py that gets the sequence file at runtime. So this is called by drag script at runtime to create a sequence file for what I should be shooting for the next hour. So it creates a sequence file that's going to define the next 1 hour of work. And then we're going to write a drag script that's going to wait for night. It's going to connect our setup. It's going to call this thing to go and get a sequence that it's going to shoot for the next hour and continue that all night long. When it's done, it's going to restart and wait for the next night. Now, I chose Python as my development environment for this little project. And for anybody that doesn't know, Python is a programming language or a scripting language, however you decide to look at it. It's a pretty simple one to learn to use and at least scratch the surface of. But this was my first Python project. I had never developed anything in Python before, and the reason I'm telling you this is because what ultimately drove my decision for Python was the availability of this library called AstroPy. And AstroPy was developed to simplify the development of these types of applications, of astronomy type applications. And, it's a library of tools and functions that do all the things that you need to do if you're building an application like this. And it drastically reduced the amount of development time that I had. Just to give you a very small code example, if I wanted to know the coordinates of M33, for example, I can use this skycoord call and give it M33 as the name, and it'll kick me back the RA and DEC of M33, 2 lines of code. That's it. That's all there is. So it really reduced all of the calculations and all of the things that I would have had to build on my own, and cut down my development time on this was like 2 weeks. I think I spent about 2 weeks building it and then some time tweaking. This is the main interface screen where I define the targets and how I want them framed and how I'm going to shoot them. So this is what I do on a daily basis when I want to define a new target. I go in to this screen, and I'm going to show it to you live here in a few minutes if we have enough time. But I'm going to define the filter and how many subs I want to take and the exposures and bin and gain and offset. And then these are the rules that I want to have. So don't shoot the L filter unless I'm 90 degrees away from the moon. The moon is half full or less. The object is above 40 degrees and I'm within 90 minutes of transit. So I define all these rules for each filter, for each target that I have out there. Now I built templates that you see over here for SHO and LRGB and HARGB so that I don't have to type this in every time. I can just click a button and it preloads all of that, and then I can tweak from there. And this is a list of all the targets that I have in there. And so at runtime, it's trying to figure out which of these I should be shooting. And the way that it does that is this. It first builds a list of all the targets that are not yet complete, that are within the transition window, that don't violate the lunar separation constraint, that don't violate the lunar illumination constraint, and are above the minimum altitude. And for that whole group, it tries to calculate a score for each one of them that's based on the priority, shooting what's important to me, what I want to get done, which ones are highest in the sky, and which ones, there's a weighting there for their percent completion. So in other words, I want to try and finish something once I start it. I don't want to just, end up with a bunch of targets that are all half shot. So once I start shooting something, I want to try and complete it. It picks the thing with the highest score and it creates a sequence file like we saw before that'll be loaded into DragScript. So the whole thing is a system that looks like this. And here on a daily basis, I go in and maintain those targets like you saw on that screen a couple of seconds ago. And all of that information is going into a database. At runtime, DragScript, and we're jumping over here to the right side, DragScript starts running, waits for a safe condition. So waiting for safe condition means it's nighttime, there's no clouds, there's no rain, all of those weather events are clear. It waits for a safe condition. Then it connects all the equipment, starts up my observatory, turns everything on, and it calls this program to go out and create a sequence file for the next hour of shooting. If it finds something to shoot, it'll return that sequence file back to Voyager. If there was one found, it'll shoot it. If there wasn't one found, it'll wait 10 minutes and try again. And of course, I could have, constraints that are too tight and it doesn't find anything out there to shoot for that hour window. And for which case Voyager will sit there and wait for 10 minutes and then try again. Hey, how about now? Did we find anything yet? As soon as it finds something, it'll shoot that sequence. And when it's done, it'll say, is it dawn? Is it the end of night? If it's not, it'll go back up and do it again. Do it for the next hour. And that'll keep happening until night ends, when it disconnects everything, turns off all of the equipment, shuts everybody down, closes the roof on the observatory, and then goes all the way back up to the top to wait for the night again.
Question for you real quick.
Yeah.
Do you have this on a GitHub project? that's public?
I don't. I built this as a little personal project for myself. That was really my motivation, was just building something for me. If I was going to put something out there to be used by the masses, I probably would have, spent a little bit more time on error handling and, all those kinds of things that go along with it. But I haven't done that yet.
It'd make a good template, at least, to kind of start from, and then configure to our own setups and stuff like that.
Yeah, that may happen someday. That may happen someday. Like I said,
Right.
This is as of August of 2020, so it's still a little young. But we are running here, and I can pull this up and show you. Here we are out there on my telescope live, and while we were talking, this thing kicked off and started doing its thing. I didn't touch anything, and it kicked off and started shooting, and it's out there. It's out there, imaging right now. It looks like it's taking an image of the fish head, so it's pulled that out of my list of things that I want to shoot, and it's out there shooting. So that's how it's running. I can pull up the software here. Oops, that's TrackScript. I'm sorry, wrong one. This is my little application that I wrote, and here's a list of all the targets that I have out there, and we can pull one of these up and see how I have it framed, and so far looks like I've shot 20 L frames out of the 90 on this, and so this is still an active project. It's still out there. When I want to define a new project, I can say let's create a new one, and I don't know. What do we want to shoot? M42. Go and find it for me, and it'll pull up the RA and deck of the object. This is Voyager focusing. I'm sorry. Let me just slide this down a little bit, and we'll ignore that while that's out there running. I told you this was live. So anyway, and then I can, pull up my template and say we want this to be LRGB, and it pulls in the template that I've set up for how I want this to go. And if I wanted to tweak something, maybe this is a little low in the sky, so maybe I decided that I'm going to, allow it to go all the way down to 30 degrees and not, and still shoot. So I can tweak those rules and save them, and that's it. That's all I do to set up a new target to shoot it. Sir.
Tim, this is Tolga. I have a question.
Yeah.
When you and I were talking about your project a few months ago, you had told me a feature that you were going to implement. I was wondering if you did it. It was going to monitor the file folder for how many, what got done. Yes. And if you deleted some of the files, it would know, oh, okay, altogether there are 30 frames you're supposed to take.
Right.
Did you do that?
Yes, I did. In fact, I skipped over it because I know we're running long, and I was trying to move quickly, but right here. So what it does is when the sequence is getting ready to go, the first thing that it does is it goes out onto the hard drive and it looks at the exposures that are taken but not yet reviewed. I call them pending exposures, and it counts those up and uses them, to figure out how far along we are. So it's out there actually counting the images that were taken and using that to update this completed subs field. Like we see in some of these other ones. Let's go to this guy. So it actually counted up the images out on the disk and tells me that there's 30 O3 and 12 S2 and 12 HA. Now, what actually happens
later on, if you review them and
so that's what I was just going to.
4 of them, it knows.
Right. That's what I was just going to show you. So in the morning, when I go to check what shot the night before, I come in here to pending observations, and this happens to be what it shot tonight. But I come in here and I see everything that was shot, and I load them up in Blink, and in Blink and PixInsight, and any subs that are bad that I want to reject, I can just turn them off and click save. And those will be removed, and the rest will be counted.
No, I just thought that this should be mentioned because that's really a unique and cool feature.
Yeah. So that's how I'm doing that. As far as the framing goes, I also have the ability to take the framing data from either Telescopius or Voyager's web dashboard, which includes a framing thing as well. But I can go into Telescopius, frame it up the way that I want, and then pull the data right out of there. Just click this button, it'll pull the data out of Telescopius and drop it in here when I'm defining something. I have the ability to pull up plots of the object altitude. So this is what what this little bugger is gonna look like, and the colored line that you see here is the object. The dotted line is the moon. The red line is the sun, and the color indicates the azimuth, where it is in the sky, and of course this is the altitude on the y-axis. All of this made possible by that library that I showed you. This here that you see, this is just a quick little visual for me that tells me when is the best time of the year to shoot this particular object. So you can see IC 405. I'm getting a little late. It doesn't look like I'm going to finish this year. But if we go and look at M81, M82, you can see this is. This object almost never sets in the northern hemisphere, so you can see how it's, showing me that here as, just a quick little look. But I don't need to concern myself with that. The software is figuring out what to shoot and when. This is just for my information. So that's how all of that works. Let's get rid of that there, and you can see we're out there shooting right now, and like I say, it's shooting without any input from me. And we just covered this, so these are those. Oh, the one that I didn't show you, I do have the ability to preview what the night's shooting is going to look like. So all else being equal, go and show me what you're going to do tonight, and it kind of gives me a little view. I use that just to make sure that I have something out there to shoot. And so that's it. That's what I wanted to show you. There's my contact information. I welcome anybody to reach out to me if there's a question that you have, or if you start doing it on your own and you say, how in the heck do I do this, or anything like that. I'm more than happy to help you. And if there are any questions, I'd be glad to take them.
Yeah, there was one comment that I was thinking of myself over on the chat, and that you kind of sucked all the fun out of operating your system and all the problems that go along with that.
Well, I get that, and I really do. But in order to, like I say, to maximize my opportunities to shoot, and I got so few of them, I really wanted to do this. Now, just to make sure that I don't completely eliminate myself from all this, I still have a little rig that I go out and run on nice warm nights when I want to sit outside and stare up at the stars. So I have a couple of little rigs that I run that way. But for my big scope, both here and out in New Mexico, and really for a remote observatory, this is really the way to go. I understand that it takes some of the fun out of it, but for a nerd like me, some of the fun is in building all this software too. So.
Well, there is some enjoyment, even though I run personally an automated system, but I do have some fun kind of watching it start up and watching it shut down.
Yep, I do the same thing.
Seeing the data come in. Oh, look at that. That looks really nice. And
yeah.
Even though you don't have to touch it or push it or click any buttons, it's kind of nice to see the data come in sometimes.
I do the same thing. I'll be sitting, in my living room with my wife watching something on TV, and I'll be sitting there looking at it on my phone, watching everything run, and she'll be talking to me, and I don't even know what's going on. She says, "Are you listening to me?" So I do the same thing.
That's a whole nother topic, Tim.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic. That's right.
Okay. We're going to continue to answer some questions, but before we do that, I want to remind you that if anybody is interested in looking at the files that Steve's going to be using next week, the links to them are, I believe, on our Facebook page, as well as the astroimagingchannel.org. You can get the links to that, download them, and maybe follow along. I should advise you, if you're going to be following along, that we've got this philosophy on the Astro Imaging channel that we're kind of like one of those cooking shows. And so there will be times where instead of waiting for the processor to do its 5 minutes worth of analysis and processing. We've already done that. And Steve's ready to go into the next part. So you might want to go through a lot of the processes yourself on those images. So I know that there were some questions. Glenn asked a question a while back. Which camera does not have infrared? I think, did you find one that didn't have infrared to your liking?
Yeah, and you know what? I'll be darned if I can remember what the heck the name of it was, but I'll find it and I'll get it back to you.
And that's why you've got these contact information.
That's
here.
right.
and there's some geeky, nerdy questions that I don't understand anyway.
I'm ready for them. Give them to me.
Well, yeah, it's like, well, there's a big cheer for Python, and then there's let's see, there's a strong sentiment that you should put this up on GitHub so that people can play with it while, even though it's not finished. They understand it's not finished. So go ahead and put it up there.
Yeah. So let me tell you my thoughts on that. Go ahead.
How much data is out there on your computer right now? How much can you store right now?
Oh, I have a 12T array on my computer. So
yeah.
On my main system where I'm actually doing the processing, the computer on the telescope, it's got like 128 gig drive or something like that. It's very small. And what I do, and I thank Tolga for this great little idea, but I use OneDrive and I store all the images on OneDrive, so they automatically get synced to my main computer. And then when I move them off of the OneDrive on the main computer, it removes them from the telescope. So I don't keep anything on the scope itself.
Now, you said that you've got a telescope, you've got objects of interest. SBKLB1 asks, how do you select your targets of interest? Are you using Telescopius, or how did you find which images you wanted to take?
I do use Telescopius quite a bit. So I use their What's Up Tonight tool to find things. I'm a new imager. I've only been doing this for 2 years, guys. So I don't have the experience of someone like the other folks that you see here on the Astro Imaging channel. So I use Telescopius to figure out what's up, and I look for targets that are going to fit well in my field of view and that I think are interesting. I do a lot of narrowband stuff. Just because of the light pollution that I have here. Now with the setup out in New Mexico, I've got more ability to do more broadband, and I'm looking forward to that. But that's one of the ways that I do it. I also confess to cheating, and I subscribe to, or not subscribe, but I do subscribe to some great photographers out on Astrobin. And when I see Eric post a beautiful image, and I say, boy, that's a really cool target. I never heard of that before. And that'll, kick off a little research session for me to go out there and read up about it and, see if it's something that would work well for me. So I do a lot of that. I look at a lot of images on Astrobin and use that as inspiration. So that's how I'm finding them.
We all do that, Tim.
Yeah, I admit to thievery. I'll admit to it.
Well, when you see something really interesting and it's, you can see it, and I got to get that image.
Yeah,
I got to get that target.
Yeah.
But one tip on that is not look at the current pictures, but if you're following a person, go to their last year's pictures and go a month before or two. Because if you look at a target now that they just posted, it may have been too late.
That's a good idea.
DM Callie asks, what GUI are you using for your Python apps? And he notes that that's impressive work you're doing.
Yeah, so that's PyQt5. It's an implementation of the Qt library, which is the same library that PixInsight uses. So it's just the Python callable version of Qt. Or cute. Some people call it cute. If they're sexy developers, they call it cute. I'm obviously an old guy.
Okay, I'm wandering one through here as well as I can on the questions. You've started an argument out there about whether this is even fair or whether we should all go out. I'll tell you what, guys, go buy yourself a big frickin' daub and go, you don't need to be at the telescope when you're taking pictures. Get yourself a daub and learn the sky.
I'll tell you why it's fair, because I spent the money to build it. That's why it's fair.
Not to mention the time and
Not to mention the time, yeah.
debugging and writing. Like I have a mostly automated backyard setup, and I still feel like it was the culmination of years of hard work, to learn all of this stuff.
And really, in the way that I look at it, the process of taking the images is mechanical. The art and the creativity come when we sit down in front of PixInsight. So, for me, the process of taking the images is the mechanical stuff. And heck, if I can automate the mechanical stuff and spend more time doing the creative stuff, more time processing and working with the things that I get, well, that's why I wanted to do it.
Yeah, we've had that argument in many different forums about what is fair. Is it fair to have a bigger telescope, a bigger camera, be it a remote site, and on and on and on? And it's open to anyone. Anyone can have any setup or any location.
Well,
it depends on effort as much as anything, as much as money.
So and here's a little waxing politic from Tim Hutchison. I personally, if you're making yourself happy, who cares what's fair and what isn't fair? And we're not competing with each other. We're producing images, and I come to this from a photography background. I was a terrestrial photographer and a hobbyist for a long time, and what made me happy was what I was shooting, and I didn't really care if anybody else was happy about it or I wasn't trying to sell it. I was just doing what I enjoyed, and so the fairness implies that there's some sort of competition between us, and I don't personally see it that way.
Well, you can hold that non-competing thought for a while.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, there's one thing I've got to.
Somebody, I posted a picture on my local club's email thing, and somebody said, "Oh, that because I shoot from New Mexico," they said, "Oh, that's cheating," and I said, if I was cheating, you ought to be able to catch me,
Yeah. When I admit to it, I'm not cheating.
Yeah.
There was a comment a couple of times during the show about how, some of the people who come on the Astroimaging channel, they're like the real pros. Just to make a long story short, actually, what we're looking for are astroimagers, some of which are certainly exemplary, but we're looking for people that have invented things. We're looking for people that have fought through problems and come up with good solutions. I can't say that our goal is to bring you the world's best astroimagers. I don't even know what the world's best astroimagers means. Our goal is to create a community where people can get together and learn about astroimaging. And some of our most popular programs have come from people who are just a year into it, and they just want to tell their stories about some of the mistakes they've made and where they've gone with them. And those are some of our most popular shows. So don't think you've got to be the world's greatest imager or processor or anything else. You need to be somebody who would want to share what you've learned a little bit. Now, just because we have a few geniuses like Tim Hutchison that comes along that
hardly
a lot, okay, doesn't mean that everybody else doesn't have something to contribute. So we'll get on that. Okay, have we got everything, Eric?
Yes, and a little bit more too. So
okay,
doing some philosophy this time.
We're still up at above 94. We were up as high as 109 at one point, and we usually lose people when we go long, and we did go long, but it's okay. It's just our family. Hey, next week Steve's going to be here talking about how to process the Hubble palette, and so come on back and be part of it. Okay. Thank you all very much. Molly, you're in charge.
Tim, you can hang with us after the show closes.
And Steve is out there too still, I think.
Steve.
Very well. Yep, I will.
Okay.
Good night, all.
Good night.